We all rely on farmers and ranchers, but farming is riskier than other businesses out there. Crop insurance helps farmers manage their risk. With crop insurance, farmers put skin in the game by paying premiums and shouldering deductibles. That keeps taxpayers from having to pick up the whole bill every time disaster strikes. Today, about 90% of U.S. farmland is insured, providing $100 billion in protection to more than 130 different kinds of crops. It's a testament to the program's success.
Senator Tina Smith from the state of Minnesota, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's great to have a chance to talk with you.
For starters, can you tell us a little bit about the state of Minnesota and the kinds of agriculture we might find in it?
The thing that is so important to know about Minnesota is that agriculture and food is really the foundation of our economy. And Minnesota's agricultural economy is strong because it's so diverse. So we have everything, of course, from corn and soybeans, pork. We're #1 turkey producer in the country. Sugar beets are an extremely part of our agricultural economy. And then we've got some really great big companies that take our food products and turn them into great products like General Mills and Cargill and Hormel. All of that is a driver in employment and big economic generator for the state.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you joined the Senate, Minnesota had a senator on the Senate Agriculture Committee, but you pushed for you yourself to be a member of that committee. Why did you think it was important to have both of Minnesota's senators on that committee?
Well, I think it's just so important that we have strong Minnesota voices on the Ag Committee, and Senator Klobuchar is an outstanding voice for agriculture. Also, of course, Colin Peterson in the House is a great friend and mentor of mine as I've really dived into these issues, first as Lieutenant Governor and now in the Senate. I find that in agriculture, on agricultural issues, it's much less partisan, which I really appreciate so much, and it's much more, people, having, regional interests that they want to make sure get heard. And I wanted to be on the Agriculture Committee because I knew it was so important to Minnesota's economy, and also I knew that this year was going to be Farm Bill year, and I wanted to be able to help out in Minnesota as best I could.
So let's talk about that Ag Committee and what's important to you on it. What are some of the biggest priorities for Senator Tina Smith every time she walks into that Senate Agriculture Committee room?
Well, I'm thinking really about three things. I'm thinking about how can we have strong farm programs, crop insurance, conservation programs, kind of the key elements of a strong farm program. Also, how can we make sure that we keep strong nutrition programs? And then third of all, there's a whole package of policies that the Farm Bill works on, that the Agriculture Committee and the Farm Bill works on, having to do with rural development. And this is something that is near and dear to my heart, whether we're talking about rural economic development and especially rural broadband.
Mm-hmm. And what can you tell me about some of your other committee work, some of the other committees that you serve on here in Washington, and why you think they're important to your home state?
The committees that I have really deal with the bread and butter issues that matter to Minnesota, and there's a lot of synergy between them. So you've got the Agriculture Committee, we've got the HELP Committee, Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. There's lots of back and forth between health issues and farm issues. And then I've got the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. I'm also on the Indian Affairs Committee. There's increasing connection, I think, between Indian Affairs and the Agriculture Committee as I'm working to make sure that Minnesota's 11 sovereign nations, that their voices are heard, both in the writing of the Farm Bill and also in other agricultural work that we do. Like, for example, let's make sure that native produced products can be included in our ag exports programs.
Mm-hmm. So before your time in politics, you had some experience in the private sector working for a food company,
Yeah.
General Mills, of course. But what's the learning curve been like going from the food side of the equation over to helping to legislate on the production side of the equation as well as the food side of the equation and trying to bring those two processes together?
Right, yeah. So when I first was out of graduate school and moved to Minnesota 34 years ago with my brand new husband, Archie, my first job was at General Mills. And after a couple of years, I left General Mills and started my own little company. And that experience has been just so helpful. I think a lot of times people in the private sector, it's good to have private sector experience when you're in the public sector. And I know what it's like to make payroll and make sure that my business is working the way it's supposed to work, and I bring that experience here to Washington, D.C. it is, I've been here for 4 months now, and I'm starting to feel like I know my way around a little bit. I can appreciate that being in the Senate is something that takes more than 4 months to really, takes more than 4 months to really get on top of, but I've had so much help from my colleagues, and really, it's an amazing opportunity to be here.
Mm-hmm. For lack of a better term, prior to being the lieutenant governor in Minnesota, you were sort of a behind-the-scenes political operative, working on campaigns, working as a chief of staff, etc. Are you comfortable in the spotlight quite yet?
I am. I feel like I am, one of the things about being lieutenant governor was that I traveled all over the state. I just, went everywhere, talked to thousands of people, I'm sure. I have said that being lieutenant governor is a little bit like being invited into Minnesota's living rooms or into their city halls, their libraries, and having that base of experience and feeling like I know Minnesota well gives me a lot of confidence that I am ready to dive in here.
Mm-hmm. So what's different for you between being a United States Senator and being a lieutenant governor?
It's so interesting to look at issues that matter so much to Minnesota, but from a different angle. So when I was lieutenant governor, I did a lot of work building relationships with Minnesota's ag community. We did work like, working with great companies like Hormel on Beyond the Yellow Ribbon program to thank them for their work welcoming veterans back to back to Minnesota. And I did a lot of work on water issues with Minnesota agriculture. And of course, we had this huge avian flu challenge a few years ago, and I worked really closely with the turkey producers as we were doing emergency response and recovery to that. So I know all those people, but now I'm talking to them about the Farm Bill and about the federal reauthorization of the pandemic bill and the Help Committee, talking to them about trade issues. It's kind of like same issues, but from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of people when they come to Washington, they come to fix 1, 2, 3 really specific things. They have their headline issues. Do you have those headline issues? Do you have the issues that you're, inside or outside of foreign policy? Do you have those issues that you're most passionate about as a politician?
Well, a lot of people who come to Washington come after having decided to run for the Senate, spending 18 to 24 months running, and then here they are, and they're here for 6 years. And I'm doing it all backwards. I was appointed 4 months ago. This is not, I never anticipated this moment. And so sitting here today, what I would say my number 1, number 2, and number 3 issue is really Minnesota first. Everything I do every day is focused on what do Minnesotans need and how can I be their voice here in Washington.
Now, I want to wrap up talking about something that is kind of a holdover from the days of Senator Franken, that of course being the Minnesota Congressional Hot Dish Competition.
Yes.
And I understand the most recent competition happened here a little bit earlier this year, but I'm looking for your personal opinion. What is your go-to hot dish?
Well, that hot dish was a little controversial, that competition, because Congressman Emmer won, but it was a tie. And so there was a little bit, I think Congressman Nolan, he tied, and then the tie was broken by our MC. I think Congressman Nolan was a little bitter about this. But I like a hot dish, but I'm fine-tuning the recipe. My mom used to make something that she called hamburger pie, and it was a hot dish with hamburger and mashed potatoes and green beans and like a whole dinner all in one, which is the beauty of hot dish. We had a version of that in the competition a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to keep on fine-tuning that recipe because I don't have my mom's recipe, so I'm working on it.
Senator Tina Smith from the state of Minnesota, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.